All right. Hi, everyone. I am Kylie Schedule. I am a soil conservationist out of the Ontario office, and I will be the facilitator of the meeting today. More or less, my job is to just help Aaron with all the tech stuff and make sure everything runs as smooth as possible. And if anyone has any questions, you can feel free to message me in the chat or however. To get us started off and kind of keep track of who's all with us today, if you would type your name and who you're representing, whether it's landowner, tribe, whichever, in the chat box. That gives us a good chance to keep track of everyone. And you can put that directly to me if you'd prefer not to put it just out in the main chat. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Kylie. And welcome everybody. This is kind of the third listening session that we've had this week. We started with cropland and pasture discussion on Tuesday, moved to the rangeland land use yesterday, and today we're kind of focus a little bit more on the forest lands and some of those challenges that we have in the county. Just as Kylie said, if you can kind of let us know who's on, we can kind of keep track of that list, and I will make sure that we get your information added to our local work group contact list. We are recording these sessions, and I plan on getting these converted to a YouTube link that we can find on our website, or I will also email this out to everybody just in case you weren't able to attend one of the other sessions, and kind of go from there. So the agenda for today is kind of up on the screen. We'll talk a little bit about some of the new NRCS staff, talk about the FSA County Executive Director and some of the changes with FSA. We'll go over the county priority resource concerns that have been identified in the last local work group meetings. And then we'll kind of focus a little bit on where we have funding opportunities currently this year. Talk about some of the current CISs, and then maybe dive into a little bit of where we see some of the future work maybe happening in the county. And then kind of the last big thing is really to get some input and comments from both the partners and the landowners that are on, and see if there maybe needs to be some new project ideas or project areas where we can do some of this work in the county. So these are kind of the purposes of the local work group meetings. And, you know, normally we have these in person over at the ODF office, but with COVID, we're not able to do that this year. But basically we kind of go into a little bit of depth of what we accomplished in the last year. It helps shape, plan, and prioritize future projects. Talk with partners and landowners on what we're doing and how we might be able to leverage the limited funds that are available, and then an opportunity to learn about some of our programs. And this is kind of why I did the pre-recorded overview of the county, and that link to the YouTube video can be found in the chat box if anybody wants to go back and listen to that. Really the purpose of today is kind of check in, see how we're doing, what we can do better. You know, are there emerging technologies that we need to incorporate into some of our planning efforts that we can help within the county, and then really kind of gather that input and ideas from everybody that's participating today. If you're looking for the location of that YouTube video over the overview, you can go to the Oregon NRCS website, and we have a local work group meeting page. If you scroll through that, there's a Grant County page, and that's where most of that information is located. And this does get updated every year if you ever are looking for that kind of information. So I probably should have introduced myself, but I think I kind of know everybody that's on. I'm the district conservationist. My name is Aaron Roth. In the NRCS office now. Hannah Mears is the soil con, and she's been with us for a little bit over 2 years. Stephanie Muart just started here in January, so she's one of the new staff, as well as Teresa Perkins, who also started in January. but she's kind of worked with us the last couple of years in the CREP technician position, and has spent a lot of time in the county working with us back in the day or for the Soil and Water Conservation District. It looks like we also have Matthew Brown and Austin Reimer on the call today, and they are kind of the folks with ODF that help a lot with the NRCS projects. So I appreciate you guys taking the time to call in today. We are in the process of refilling the CREP technician position. Talked to Kyle yesterday, and we're hoping to get that advertised here in the next couple of weeks. And then we also will be adding a third soil con to the John Day office, hopefully sooner than later. Just wanted to provide a quick update on the Farm Service Agency and some of the changes that have occurred there. The last handful of years, the county executive director has been out of Baker, and they have been basically in charge of Grant County as of January 1st. That has changed from Baker to Harney County. Emma Gabriel is the executive director down there, and basically she's been coming up on Tuesdays and meeting with producers in the county here in the office. So that's kind of a permanent change that just happened. Just have a couple of the programs that they're actively working on and some of the deadlines. And I guess if you have any additional questions, her email and phone number are down below, and she'd be more than happy to talk to you, I'm sure. They're also in the process of hiring a full-time program assistant here for the office, and they conducted interviews on Tuesday. So hopefully they'll have somebody here full-time here shortly. So this is basically the county priority lists that have been identified over the last number of local work group meetings. And for the folks that have been on a couple of these this week, we've kind of talked about them, but I just kind of want to highlight them again. You know, the top one is the invasive species, which can include the juniper, the annual grasses, the herbaceous weeds, forest health, wildfire, hazard, all the bugs and those kind of things are number 2 on the list, and this could include aspen restoration. So that's kind of why we're having the forestry listening session today. Grazing management can include stock water developments, cross fencing for private lands, and grazing plans. We talked quite a bit about that yesterday. Maybe looking at doing some educational outreach on some of those topics. On Tuesday, when we were focused more on the crop and pasture land use, the water quality, water quantity, resource concern was a pretty big part of that discussion, which can include irrigation efficiency improvement projects, stock water, streamside vegetation, those kind of things. And then the fifth one is kind of the new one in the area or in the county, is starting the conversation on easements and what those might look like, and trying to keep working lands working and reduce the mitigation of subdivisions. So here is kind of the 2021 Grant County funding priority map. And as you can kind of see, there's quite a few areas where we're doing some pretty good work. It's kind of broken into 2 different funding streams on this map, at least. The environmental quality incentives program are kind of on the north end of the county, and that includes the JDU Basin Forest Resiliency Project and the Ritter Upland Management Area. So this is kind of the first year that we've been in that area, and typically we'll be in those locations from anywhere to 3 to 5 years, trying to make sure that we can meet kind of the acreage or the project goals. And those are primarily juniper control, aspen restoration, and the pre-commercial thinning. So for this year, that's one of the locations where we can be doing some of the forest thinning work. The Kaler, multi-county upland improvement project is kind of in the Kimberly Monument areas. There also is a component of that for doing pre-commercial thinning on the forests, but also juniper removal, stock water developments, seeding, and herbaceous weed control. The other funding opportunities is the Regional Conservation Partnership Program. And basically that's where partners within the county have put in a grant through NRCS to bring additional funding into the county that comes from the national office. And so we've been pretty successful in the county at doing that. We have 3 of those currently. 2 of them are still active and on this map. And the other good part of that is basically the partner is bringing a 1-to-1 match. So with those partners, we're able to have a much bigger impact within those areas that they've identified and outlined. So the Confederated Tribes of the Warm Springs have funding available in the Upper John Day River Flow and Protection Project. So those are primarily looking at piping ditches, doing increased on-farm water efficiency projects, as well as some funding for easements. The South Fort John Day Watershed Restoration Project was put in by the Watershed Council out there and Amy Steiner. From the map, you can kind of see we're going to be working in kind of the upper watersheds this year, and then plan to shift to the lower watersheds next year. And again, that's some locations where we can do some pre-commercial thinning, juniper work, kind of those similar upland practices as in some of the other enhancements to really kind of improve the range and forest in those locations. So this is just kind of the written version, what we talked about on the map there. We also do have some state initiatives, including the seasonal high tunnel, the energy audits, and the organic and transition to organic funding pools available. And if anybody is interested in any of those funding opportunities, the deadline for this year is going to be April 16th. 2021. So get a hold of us. We can get you an application and we can kind of go from there. The other program that's been pretty popular in the county over the years is the Conservation Stewardship Program, or CSP. We are taking applications for the classic sign up. The deadline for those is March 26th, which is a little bit over a month away. We anticipate across the state that there'll be continued interest in that program. And I guess just kind of a heads up, the program after the 2018 Farm Bill has changed quite a bit. The funding that was in that Farm Bill has gone from about $9 billion a year across the country to about half of that amount in the current Farm Bill. So that program has become much more competitive, and it's a little bit harder to get in, but we certainly are willing to work with you to put in a good, strong application, and hopefully we can get some more of those funds available. And that program, you can do work on the forest as well as the other ag land uses. So there's kind of an opportunity for both. And I guess really that was just kind of my program updates real briefly, and kind of the rest of today is really kind of geared towards getting some input from folks that are on the meeting. So I'll just kind of leave the map up, and we've kind of just been going down the list of participants the last couple of sessions, and if you have ideas, comments, or suggestions, we can go from there. So let's start today with Kurt. If you can, Kurt Spencer, if you can unmute your phone, we'll kind of get some input from you.
Am I unmute now, Aaron?
Hey, we can hear you.
You can hear me?
We can. Yep, we're good.
You can hear me? Okay. Aaron, I really don't have any, I gave a lot of comments yesterday, but I don't have anything else to add to the forestry.
Okay.
I'm in that CSB program. It's good. Somebody made a comment about the market yesterday, and it is very difficult on timber. So yes, we could work on that market a little bit. Seems like it's went away in the last 10 years. So other than that, I don't really have a lot of input. Yesterday they mentioned the reservoirs for fire protection. That was a very good suggestion. I'm behind that one as well. And that's about my thoughts on the forestry.
Okay, thanks, Kurt. Maybe sticking out in IZ, Richard. Any thoughts, ideas from you?
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, could you give me just a brief recap on Kurt's comment on the reservoir fire protection, since I didn't catch that yesterday?
Yeah, so basically, there was a number of landowners that expressed interest in developing either ponds or troughs or something that maybe can be used for livestock and wildlife, but also for fighting wildfires. We seem to have a lot of spring runoff that kind of comes and goes, and then by the summer we're struggling for water. So if there was comments, if there's ways that we can maybe store some of that water that we can use for those other purposes, that would be a benefit for a lot of different things.
Is funding available for that sort of thing, or is this kind of just a new thought that we could explore?
So a lot of the spring developments and stock water projects that we've been putting in, we've been trying to put in much larger tire troughs or some storage capacity, with the thought that, if you had a fire truck that came by, they could, drop their pump in there and fill up. But this could be something that we look at into, developing a new conservation implementation strategy for the county and saying, hey, we're gearing this more towards the firefighting side of things or something. So we're kind of in the beginning phases of that discussion. We'd have to probably figure out a way to prioritize, where we'd want to work or how we'd want to work through some of those things. But that's kind of part of this meeting, is maybe this is where we get some new ideas, and then we start working towards looking at a funding source for some of those things.
Last year we had 3 or 4 lightning fires start on the ranch when that storm came through, and if it hadn't have been for the ability to get water out of the river, and it was difficult then because it was low, but we had one spot that had a good source of fairly deep water, and if it hadn't have been for that availability, it would have been a much greater potential for a big deal. As it was, we were able to get them all out after a couple of acres.
Okay. So
it really is important. Having water available for helicopters to pick up for fire protection is, I learned last year just how critical that is.
Okay. Anything else on the forest fuels reduction side or thinning side from you, Richard?
I guess the only other thing that that I would like to comment about is on our ranch, where we border the roadless area, Utley roadless area, and that whole roadless area is a fire waiting to happen. And and I don't know how many other folks might be affected by adjacent U.S. Forest Service uncared for, unmanaged acreage that is a fire hazard. But in our case, if we could get some kind of assistance and help on mitigating activities on that fire break, it would be very helpful and would allow for an opportunity for hopefully stopping a fire coming either direction, either from the forest to private or private to forest.
Just give me a little while. This meeting lasts more than you.
Okay, yeah, that was kind of mentioned yesterday, and I think I saw a couple of other hands pop up that's definitely a concern. And a lot of times, most of our forestry funding has been kind of targeted on working on that private-public boundary and trying to build in some of those buffers. But it's just a challenge. There's so many acres that kind of need some of that treatment. But something we'll continue to look at and explore. And doesn't look like I don't see anybody from the Forest Service on today, but I'm sure the ODF folks are aware of some of those challenges, and I think we'll continue to work along some of those lines. Do you see the pre-commercial thinning that we're doing as being sufficient, or are you looking more at, you would like to see more of a fuel break with wider spacing and work along those lines?
In the past, when we had a pre-commercial thinning that abutted the Forest Service, ODF allowed us to create an actual clear-cut fire break between private and forest, and it didn't amount to very much of a linear border, but that's the kind of thing that would help immensely.
Okay.
And obviously, the pre-commercial thinning is a huge benefit and advantage on within the property. But when we abut the Forest Service to get at least 100-foot clear cut, I think is going to be required to stop any kind of a significant fire that's going to be burning one direction or the other.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us today. Amy or Hannah with the South Fork Watershed Council, you guys have any thoughts on that or anything to add?
Yeah, it's great to hear from the landowners and what their priorities are. So I'll let them go for it.
Okay. And maybe, I know we've got 3 or 4 folks on from ODF, Allison or Kirk, you want to maybe give us some of your thoughts on this topic or other topics for the county?
Sure. I can sympathize with Jim Dovenberg and Richard Nelson being large landowners and owning that much property next to the federal boundary. And something does need to be done. Richard, I'd forgot about that fuel break. That must have been 4, 5, 6 years ago when that happened. But Aaron, is this where you'd like to talk about upcoming priority areas as well for treatment?
Yeah, we certainly can.
Or is that going to be the wrap up at the end of the meeting?
Nope, it's kind of ebbed and flowed because certain people have areas maybe where they want to work or suggestions on what we do. So if you have ideas.
Well, I want to say that, ODF is very thankful for NRCS and the funding they bring to the table to provide this assistance to landowners, because ODF, sometimes our funding isn't there like it was historically. But we are in the process of always applying for new grants. And with that being said, I mentioned this last year in this meeting, or maybe it was the year before, Aaron, but one of the priority areas I think NRCS should look at is is that northern boundary of the Malheur National Forest. And by that, I mean from east of Long Creek all the way west to Hamilton. There's a big chunk of ground in there, Fox Valley, Long Creek, and there's been a lot of logging going on there, on that boundary with private landowners. Sharon Livingston has a big job going on now, and there's been a lot done on the private property side of the fence on that northern boundary as far as commercial thinning. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there to work with landowners to complete the process with the follow-up pre-commercial thin. So I think that area, I just drove through it yesterday again through Fox Valley, and you come out there on Highway 402 west of Long Creek, and you know, the forest, I don't think they've done anything in that country in a long time. And I sort of wish Roy was on the call to discuss that with him, but he's not. So, you know, I think that's an area of the county that, you know, we need to try and focus on in the near future.
Okay.
So that's all I have, Aaron.
Okay, thanks, Kirk. And then we just do have a comment in the chat box talking about NEPA on the Forest Service ground and you know, some of those kind of timelines. And I know when we've talked to Roy, they kind of have a priority list for different parts of the county, and I know they're trying to work through that. So they kind of have a game plan for that, and I guess it would just be looking at that map and kind of seeing where the different landowners are and kind of that timeline. But something else that we talked about a little bit at the local work group meeting last year, and we've kind of got a group kind of working on it, is called Joint Chiefs funding, and basically that's funding that the Forest Service and NRCS can apply for, with the idea of doing some of these treatments across boundaries to really maybe make a bigger dent in some of these issues that we're running into. So we kind of have a little committee that's working on some of those things currently, and the NEPA side of that definitely is part of it, because basically those project areas have to be NEPA ready if we're going to go in there and ask for that assistance. So that kind of limits where we can go, but that is something we're going to continue to pursue. You know, ODF's a partner in that. Forest Service is a partner with that. Grant Soil and Water Conservation District and Kyle have been to those meetings. We're working with Mark Webb and Blue Mountain Forest Partnership, and then Irene Jerome with her private consulting, and then the Firewise communities are kind of all part of that group. So that's something we're certainly pursuing. And just kind of wanted to kind of get that information out there, but we just need a lot more funding to kind of address, you know, 50, 60, 80 years of not doing a lot, and it's just going to take some time. But I appreciate your comments, Kirk, and Allison or Austin or Matthew. Would you like to provide any other input for us? I can't tell. I can't hear anything from you, Matthew, if you're talking. Nope, still pretty silent. Yeah, if you want to maybe type it into the chat, maybe we'll come back to you here in a minute. Just kind of going through the list. Carter, any comments from you today on the forested stuff?
No comments from me, Aaron. We don't have a lot of forest on our property, as you know. The little that we do, we are working on.
Okay, thanks for calling in today. Jim, and I know we've talked a number of times, but this is a opportunity to get your input.
Don't have a lot more to add, Aaron, from yesterday, except I guess on the RCPP map, how do you go from a priority 2 to a priority 1? Because we are in dire need of help, and there doesn't appear to be anything available to help from any agency, and hasn't been for a number of years. Got healthy stands of pine that were thinned 20 years ago, and textbook appearing, dying in mass, and the fear of fire from all the dead and dying. We're just not physically capable of getting it all done by ourselves. So it's pretty devastating. And of course, being neighbors to the Forest Service doesn't help, because it seems like we just keep getting repeated from bugs and mistletoe, and they don't appear to have any interest in correcting that. And it's sad for me today that they're not on this call. That would seem to be kind of important, and particularly in light of a lot of us are victims of being neighbors to them. So just concerned, and would sure like to know how we can get some help, because it's frustrating to see it grow and grow with no ability to. We do 50 to 100 acres a year, but it's a much bigger problem than that. So that would be my input. Again, I think your priorities are as listed are, invasive species is important, but I don't know that it's any more important than the forest health issues. So we're lucky enough we have both. So anyway, that would be my input. Help.
Okay. Yeah, and again, I guess I would just say RCPP priority areas kind of focus is typically defined by those partners. And then maybe Amy can add a little bit, but I know that they've got some funding to kind of do some outreach on the forested side, kind of down in the area that Jim you're talking about. And I think there was a meeting a few weeks ago with ODF and the Forest Service and ODF and W. So I'm kind of
that. I'm sorry, Aaron. That funding that Amy got is a great thing, but it's not allowed to be spent on private lands. So hopefully it'll be do some good on fish and game, but again, a lot of it doesn't allow mechanical. So hand crews are it's not a great option with the size of the project, but at least we've got something going on the other side of the fence. My concern obviously is my side. So
okay. Well, thank you for your input.
Sure.
Take note of that, and hopefully, I think Amy talked about doing some outreach to maybe some of the other private landowners in that area, and we kind of hit on this a couple times this week, but a lot of times our funding kind of goes to those areas where we have landowners identified that are willing and able, and 1 or 2 is good, but if we can get 10 or 15 folks that are interested, that makes everybody's life a little bit easier to come in and target those locations. And I know, Jim, you've got a lot of federal neighbors and some of those other neighbors, and maybe we just need to look at some larger areas down there to see what kind of interest is present.
Okay. Thanks, Aaron.
Aaron, I just wanted to bring your attention to the chat. Had a couple comments in there.
Okay. Because it looks like Austin and Matthew are still on super mute mode. So let's see. So from Austin, we're going to suggest the same area that Kurt suggested. It sounds like they're also excited to be out in the Ritter area for the 2021 projects. So That's kind of an example of a group that's kind of come to these local work group meetings for quite a bit of time and have spent a lot of time doing outreach. So we're hoping Ritter is a positive result here in the next 3 to 5 years, and we can kind of address some of those issues that have been identified. So the other comment from Jeffrey, both of our properties have old growth Ponderosa pine adjacent to our property on the Forest Service land. It seems like fuel reduction around these stands would be a priority for all. And Jeffrey, I guess you're on. You want to unmute and maybe you can give us a little more information on that and kind of give us your thoughts.
Sure. I'll just echo. I shared a little bit of this yesterday, but yeah, our next priority, and I've been trying to have conversations with Umatilla and Meow here in National Forest on our properties that border them to do fuels reduction, because we have done quite a bit of juniper work and pine thinning on both those places. But then right next to us on the Forest Service lands, it's overstocked, and that's where the fire is gonna come in. And so, like I put in the chat box earlier, is when I talked to Umatilla National Forest, they said they were doing a lot of thinning up in Bologna Basin, but they hadn't included the area adjacent to our property in the last NEPA that they did. So that's why I mentioned the NEPA thing. If we could start asking the Forest Service to start doing those studies that they're required to do now, maybe in 2 years or 3 years or 4 years, we'd be able to get them to do some thinning on those properties. But the other challenges I've had with both Umatilla and Meow here is just getting actual maps of old growth, designated old growth Ponderosa pine on federal lands. It's like pulling teeth. In fact, I never did get one that was just based on Ponderosa pine. It was mapped as old growth habitat for a woodpecker. It was focused on a wildlife species and not what was growing there. But also, I would just reiterate the reservoir idea. I brought that up yesterday also, is that I think there's a huge opportunity to capture a lot of winter flows and store those for a variety of other reasons, to use for fire protection, could be used for even irrigation, wildlife enhancement later in the summer when water is not as readily available. And then the other thing was just regarding the pre-commercial thinning that you guys were mentioning. I wasn't aware that there were any funds for that. We've only done the forest stand improvement. Is that the same prescription, or is it something different?
No, primarily that's kind of synonymous with the same thing.
Okay, so forest stand improvement is considered pre-commercial thin?
Yeah, and that's something we've talked to ODF about, and it might be more site specific, that in this case we're looking at fuels reduction, or if you have the bark beetles or the engravers, then it's more forest health. But I think within that practice we can address all those considerations, and it's just kind of a specification or kind of a guideline
right,
built on each property.
The forest stand improvement is just like 12 inches or smaller on the pine, or 10 inches possibly. But we still have a lot of pine that's larger than that, that's not commercial quality, that would the forest would benefit from having a lot of that removed also. So that's not really something NRCS is funding currently. Is that correct?
So I know Andrew Owen's on. He's our state forester, and the person that was kind of in charge of that before had a little bit different vision than how he's seeing those things. So we've had some of those conversations with ODF, that maybe we've in the past been too focused on certain DBH classes and some of those things, and instead maybe need to look more at forest health and taking out some of that larger material. So I think that's something we'll continue to look at and address. So in the future, you may see some changes to those specifications to include that. But looks like Andrew's on. Do you have any other thoughts or ideas along those lines?
Aaron, I think you summarized it really well. I think we have the discretion to make those judgment calls. That was somewhat of a national quote unquote opinion, where trees of a certain size automatically had a certain merchantable value to them. And I think really we're trying to change the narrative and the focus to be more after building resilient and resilient landscapes and not so focused on diameter caps. So I think we can really encompass those kind of thoughts in a forest management plan. And if the forest management plan is done that meets all of our planning criteria, I think we can kind of move away from that concept of a diameter cap and get more at spatial arrangement, heterogeneity within the stand. And as long as we're addressing the resource concerns and we're doing that and addressing all of our planning criteria, I think we have the latitude to make those decisions. So I think you summarized it well, and for what it's worth, what I added, I think we can start moving in that direction pretty rapidly.
So the other thing that I mentioned yesterday, which is more applicable for today, is just the commercial viability of Ponderosa pine out there has been suspect, obviously, in the last few years, and it's a challenge, at least most recently for us, trying to sell to the local mill there in John Day, because they have a 10-year stewardship contract to pull federal timber off of federal lands, and so the private landowners are in a little bit of a hard spot. So I would be interested. I'm not sure if this is the proper forum for this or not, but I understand that Ritter created a forest cooperative where they actually bought a portable sawmill and hired a person that was going around to the different landowners. Maybe that's something that we could do in Grant County, also in a couple other spots where we may have multiple landowners that could create some kind of co-op to create some value added, lumber, on site, or make cabin kits or something. But I'm not sure if this is the group that could be able to push something like that forward or not. But
I'd be happy to follow up with you. I know we do have some definitions and some policy that we're going to have to thread the needle in terms of wood utilization and how it's defined both at the national level, and then I know ODF has their own definitions of what constitutes non-industrial private forest, and how the ownership and how it intersects with the wood processing facilities. So we've got to, we'll have to make sure that we thread that needle, of course. But I do think we have some latitude. I've worked extensively in the Ponderosa pine ecosystems where I've found ways around, looking at just diameter caps. So I definitely think we can be creative and we can address your concerns. I don't know if Aaron wants to address that now or if that's better for a follow-up. But I'm happy to be part of that conversation for sure.
Yeah, and I guess I would just add in the Ritter example, it's great that group kind of has done that and kind of got that in place. And that's where some of this funding hopefully will kind of dovetail into that, so that they can use some of that juniper and instead of burning it all, get a product out of it and maybe create some jobs. So that's kind of the first example of that we have in the county. But we've met with ODF, we've met with the collaborative, and we're probably going to have some contractor tours and try to get the word out that, there maybe is an alternative market for some of that material. And if we can help facilitate that in some way, I think we'll try to do that. Whether or not we have the funding to go out and get a portable mill or something else, that probably would be, another group or, landowners getting together and saying, hey, let's pool our money and do that. But, I think we have the ability to bring the funding in there that then maybe feeds those kind of operations and create some more jobs or get some of that material off the landscape.
So that does kind of bring up another point for forestry stuff that NRCS does too. I know we got an OWEB grant to do some work on our property there on Big Flat near IZ. And we actually had a little bit of funding that they approved to actually limb some of the junipers and deck them so that they would be available to go to a facility for commercial use. Is that something that NRCS might be able to start folding into some of their juniper control and forest stand improvement stuff that would actually compensate contractors that are doing the work to actually do the extra work to limb and deck and pile some of that material?
And go ahead, Andrew.
Again, I would say that we have the latitude at present to do that, to do things like that. Now we want to be really careful in how we articulate. We're not, our funding is set to address specific resource concerns. So if we're reducing the risk of fire, that needs to be our focus, and probably less so on the commercial and viability side. I've done a number of treatments where there's a restoration type focus, and there's also an embedded timber sale occurring at the same time. And so I really do think that there's opportunities and latitude at present to do that. We may have to be creative and have a couple brainstorming sessions to make sure we're checking the right boxes. We're within policy. You know, when you're working in some of these circumstances, we're working with ODF, a lot of circumstances, working with ODF. We have to make sure we meet all their rules, regulations, and policies. And then the same thing goes from the funding agency, in this case, the NRCS, that we're checking all the boxes for that. So again, it's really threading the needle, and I think there's enough latitude to do what you were talking about, to look at creative measures like that. We really do want to stay away from taking a lot of the work that would be considered commercial, like in a commercial sale, and supplanting it with equip dollars, you know, so we want to draw the line at some point, but I also think we have the creative latitude to solve a lot of problems. So yes, I do think we can work towards a solution that you outlined.
And then I guess, again, I would just kind of add in the Ritter situation. I think, you know, it may take a couple of years to kind of figure that out and get a better idea of, you know, what additional costs does it take for some of those guys to do some of those extra steps. So I'm hoping, you know, maybe the Ritter group with what they're doing is a kind of the trial grounds for the county. And, you know, if we can get a better feel for how that works, then we can go to Andrew and look at the scenarios and say, hey, maybe we need to make some adjustments, or, you know, we kind of need to have some of that data probably up front before we can make a push that we can stand on, I guess I would say. But I know we're certainly open to that. I know there's been challenges in other counties. Klamath, I think they would love to use all that juniper, and have run into some regulatory snags and some things down there. And so that's what we're trying to kind of work through. And, you know, hopefully we can get there. But, you know, also at the same time, we do have limited funds, and, you know, if that cost just to have them limb things gets way up there, then that's going to reduce the number of acres we can treat. So there's got to be some kind of a balance that we can achieve kind of both of those things.
So on the Ritter thing, is there maybe an opportunity for them to give a seminar to kind of share the story about what their whole experience has been?
Back at the station.
Let me see. Well, I don't see Jim's not on anymore. But that's something I could follow up. They just recently hired a new executive director out there. Bob Parker had been kind of in that role, but he decided he's got other things going on. So that's something we could certainly follow up, and maybe at the next local work group meeting that we could have them as a partner come in and kind of give us an update, the group an update on what's been going on, and some additional information, the good, the bad, the ugly, if you think that would be beneficial.
Yeah, I do. The other thing too, I'll just toss in there that I'm also pleased. You guys have done great work, and we wouldn't have got 1/10 of the work done on both our ranches if it wasn't for our federal and state and local partners. I really appreciate the work you guys do. But I'm pleased. This latest, the RCCP, we met with Amy up there, and it sounds like there's funds for actually trying to restore some mountain mahogany communities, which I think are important communities for primarily big game in Grant County. But I think I'd like to encourage NRCS and even OWEB or whoever's funding any kind of restoration out on the ground there that the aspen I'm very pleased with that's a focus too, but I think the mountain mahogany is something I know it's getting crowded out on our property, and I'm sure it's happening in a lot of other places. But I just want to encourage you to keep some resources available for restoring that plant community also.
Yeah, no, for sure. If we can get the juniper and that stuff out of there, then it's going to give them a lot better chance to keep growing. Okay, it looks like Mitch is hanging out in his truck today down in Monument Country. So Mitch, you want to give us your thoughts?
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can.
Actually, I'm up on the Middle Fork, up on a ridge, so
Okay.
I'm on an iPad. One thing I think is critical, and I know it's been taboo in Grant County a long time, but prescribed burning, getting that into, there is so much benefit from being able to reintroduce that into the stands, especially after the thinnings, both juniper thinning and pre-commercial thinning. Just because after the juniper thinnings, it's very opportunistic, and you get all the juniper that take off afterward, and can be as much as twice as much juniper come in as you took out. And so in the long run, to get the most bang out of your buck, to be able to run a little fire back through those areas and start doing it on a routine basis, just gives you so much more for your dollar that you're putting into it. And I know people are scared of that. It can be done effectively, efficiently, and safely. And even if people start out doing it on a very small scale, at least it's a start. The thinnings are all very important, but if we can follow that up with prescribed burning, I think it would be even much more effective. And it needs to be reintroduced into this ecosystem because it was such a huge part of it before. With that, I'll be quiet.
I appreciate your comments. And I think from NRCS's side, we're certainly open to that if we can get around some of the challenges that everybody knows we're facing in Oregon with the liability and some of those things. But I think there's some other counties that are doing that with some of the contractors that are coming in and kind of doing a lot of that work and taking some of the liability away. And I guess, Mitch, if you'd be willing to kind of help us, I mean, we just don't seem to have a lot of those type of people in the county. And maybe that's something we need to have a working group on to get some more people trained, or, get landowners that have the equipment kind of have the ability to do some shared resources or something. Then maybe we can kind of build some of that here. But I agree, we definitely need it. All right. Looks like I got a couple other people that we haven't heard from. Nicole, do you want to have anything, any comments on the forested land use?
I don't think I have any comments on the forest stuff. Unfortunately, a lot of our stuff is focused on riparian areas and fisheries. So I'm just excited to hear what the landowners have to say.
All right. Thanks, Nicole. I think we got Kyle on the line. You still there, Kyle?
Yes, I am. No comments on my end. If anyone had any questions, we're 3 years into our RCPP pre-commercial thinning and juniper control program in the Upper Valley, so I can answer questions, but I don't have any comments beyond that.
Okay, and then Kyle, you were able to secure some OWEB funding for doing some of that kind of work. Do you have thoughts on, is that something OWEB's going to look at more in the future?
God, I hope so. OWEB typically in the past has been, we kind of rolled the dice a little bit when we put in for that RCPP, because OWEB, we were obliged for a 50% cost share from a non-federal source. And of course, the deepest pockets would be OWEB. And we'd been a part of a couple of proposals. Well, one major proposal that had to be resubmitted a couple times in order to get through OWEB for pre-commercial thinning over in Wheeler County. So we knew we had to struggle. But OWEB was very receptive to that. We were able to get one funded in the Upper Valley, and we're hoping to get a few more out there as to meet our cost share obligations to the RCPP program. And it's a good change to see. I don't know how the recent fires on the west side maybe have also opened OWEB's mind a little bit more to that type of work, but I hope they have. And it's a needed treatment. It's needed on a watershed scale. And if it isn't done, then, well, I think we all know the consequences and can see that on other sides of the property lines. So we've got to continue to put in for those grants and hopefully be as successful as we were for the first one we got.
Okay, thanks, Kyle. And I might put you on the spot again. There's kind of the John Day Partnership Group. A lot of that work has been kind of focused more in the streams and kind of the riparian zones. I think they're going to eventually kind of look at upland stuff, but do you think that might be another opportunity to leverage some of the partners for getting some more upland work or forested work done?
I've been to a few of those meetings lately, but I haven't been to many to really gauge on how that would fit in with the priorities. I think you kind of said it that right now the priorities are towards the aquatic and riparian. There hopefully will be some interest in the uplands, but I couldn't speak to the status of that. Right now, of course, they're focused in the middle fork and down in the lower basin, I think, and up also in the North Fork as well, which are predominantly federal in holdings. And so I don't know how much opportunity in those priority areas there are for, forest management. But I guess that's all I'd have to say on that right now. I'm optimistic, perhaps.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry to put you on the spot.
That's okay.
Okay. Just kind of looking at the chats, something we kind of talked about yesterday was the concept of the beaver dam analogs. Looks like it was suggested that those also might be beneficial in the forested areas. So it may be something we'll look at in going down the road. But is there anybody else that had follow-up comments, questions? Anything else for today's session on the land use? Okay, well, I guess maybe I'll just kind of summarize a few of the points that we kind of talked about. So maybe we need to look at options of putting in some fuel breaks, some larger fuel breaks along that private-public boundary. Would like some more follow-up information from the Ritter Land Management team, maybe at next year's meeting, to kind of see how that process has been going. Are they able to use some of that material at the mill? What are the good, the bad, and the ugly of kind of that new funding? It sounds like there may be some other areas in the county where we need to look at prioritizing some funding. One was that Long Creek Hamilton country, and then kind of the area down by Dayville, Monument Dayville, kind of on that slope. So we'll certainly keep exploring those and start looking at and maybe doing some outreach to see what kind of interest is in those areas. I guess if there's no other comments or questions, we might, Kylie, if you want to bring up the poll, we can can run through that real quick. I do appreciate everybody taking the time today to call in and provide input. I think it was beneficial. Always got some new ideas and new areas to look at. Hopefully, Matthew, Austin, this was a good opportunity for you guys. Sounds like somebody let the dog out there, so hopefully everybody can see that poll. If you can answer those questions real quick, we would appreciate it. And if you have additional input down the road, let us know. We'll keep working forward, and I will try to get the recordings out to everybody probably sometime next week. And I'll hang on the line for a few more minutes if anybody has any questions, but just wanted to thank everybody for participating today.